Hey guys, today I'm going to talk about how you can create a K3d cluster locally in your laptop. But today, what I am demonstrating is not laptop. I'm going to use a machine in AWS, an Ubuntu server. But this same thing, what I do on a Linux machine, can be done on a Windows PC, or it can also be done on a MacBook. And I will explain what are the software that you need in your own laptop. So today I'm going to use an Ubuntu server and create a K3d cluster. So first of all, let me log into the machine. This is the AWS. This is a machine in my AWS account that I have created, and I am currently logged in. And now I am going to install all the necessary software to run the K3d cluster, and I am going to explain you what are the different software that you need to run the K3d. So a few things. The first of all, you need Docker installed. So if you are using Ubuntu, you can go ahead and follow the Docker documentation for Ubuntu, or if you are using MacBook or Windows, you can go ahead with the software Docker for desktop, Docker desktop, and Docker desktop would do the job for you if you are using Windows or Mac, or otherwise you can go with the apt-get installation of the Docker CE package. And then you should have Docker installed. And second thing, you should have kubectl installed, because after you created the cluster, to manage the cluster you need kubectl. So that is why kubectl should be installed on your machine. And again, whether you want to install kubectl on MacBook or Ubuntu or Windows, the process is pretty much very simple and straightforward. You can search in Google and get the documentation for kubectl and get it installed. And then the last thing that you have to install, you should install K3d. K3d is the tool that would help you create K3s clusters inside the Docker containers, and that is why you need Docker. K3d runs Kubernetes cluster inside the Docker containers. So yeah, containers inside container, that is how the K3d works, and it's absolutely fine. I mean, you don't miss any important features of Kubernetes just because you are using containers. K3d is a software that was actually developed by removing those not so important features of Kubernetes, right? And that is how K3s has come into picture. And K3d makes the cluster creation pretty simple and straightforward. So let's not get into too much technical details of these things. So these are the software that you need to install, and once you install these softwares, your laptop is ready, or whatever machine you are installing this software, the machine is ready to run a K3d cluster using one single command that takes less than 60 seconds to complete, to create a Kubernetes cluster locally. So let's get started. First, I'm going to install Docker. So in my machine, I can use apt-get. If you are using Ubuntu, you can use apt-get update and apt-get install to install Docker CE package. And better, I will check the Docker documentation, the Docker website for the documentation. So install Docker. Install Docker on Ubuntu. You can search in Google something like this, and you will be taken to the official Docker documentation, and they have a different documentation for MacBook and different documentation for Windows and for Ubuntu. So I am going with the option Ubuntu, and I'm going to install Ubuntu using some repository, the apt-get. So I'm going to blindly follow these steps. You are right. And first I will run the apt-get update command, and then I'm going to execute this apt-get install command, copy it from the Docker documentation. This is not Docker that I am installing. This is some initial software that must be installed before installing Docker, and then I need to add some Docker official GPG key so that apt-get can recognize the package that it is downloading. And then I am adding the apt-get repository for Docker, and then I will go ahead and install Docker using the apt-get update and apt-get install command. So this is how you will install Docker on Ubuntu operating system. Basically, literally what I did is I just went to the Docker documentation and followed the commands one by one, until here, starting from apt-get update, then apt-get install here, and then adding the signature, adding the repository, apt-get update, and apt-get install. These are the packages that you need to install to run Docker successfully inside a Ubuntu server. And if you are using MacBook, you can always search in Google Docker desktop for Mac. For Mac or for Windows, just search in Google for Docker desktop. Then you would be again taken to the official documentation of Docker website, where you can download and install Docker desktop for MacBook or Windows PC. So you can just go ahead and click this button and get it installed on your MacBook, or you can install Docker desktop on Windows as well. Just search for Docker desktop for Windows, and you would be taken to the respective URL where you can download and install Docker desktop on Windows. So this is how you install Docker. And Docker can be installed on Ubuntu, it can be installed on a Windows PC or a MacBook. Okay, so now you have installed Docker, and the next thing we can go ahead and install kubectl. Kubectl is the software that you should have inside your laptop if you want to remotely manage a Kubernetes cluster. So go ahead and install kubectl. You can search in Google how to install kubectl on Ubuntu. Then you would be directly taken to the official Kubernetes website, where you can find the instructions to install kubectl on Linux, on MacBook, or on Windows. So today I'm going to use a Linux operating system. So yeah, I'm going to go with these steps. They had given me some script to install kubectl. I'm just using that. Right, it's just a matter of a single command that I need to run, and then yeah, 2 commands. So let me go to the command line, and this command I can use for downloading some script which will do the automated installation of kubectl on my Ubuntu server. And then the next command I can run, that is for validating the binary. That is optional. If you want to do it, you can do. And then the next command will copy the kubectl binary to the respective system binary on my laptop. And today, like I said, I am working on a Linux machine, and kubectl is now successfully installed. You can run the command kubectl - version to confirm, or sorry, yeah, kubectl version. Yeah, you can run the command kubectl version to confirm the kubectl is successfully installed onto your Ubuntu server. So we are done with 2 steps. First step, we installed Docker. Next step, we install kubectl, and now we are going to install k3d. So let me go ahead and install k3d, and for that I can go to the website, search in Google k3d install, and yeah, I go to the k3d official website, and you can just simply scroll down and you can see the installation script. This is a scripted installation, so a single command you can copy, whether you are using MacBook, Windows, or Linux. This command is going to, no, I think for Windows the steps can be different. This is only for Linux. Okay, Linux or Mac, you can use this for Mac. And on Windows, if you are using a Chocolate for installation, this package you can install on your Windows. And in my case, I am going with the scripted installation. I can use wget command, or I can use curl command. Any one of the command is absolutely fine. The single command will take care of all the installation. So I will go to my machine. In my case, I am using an Ubuntu server from AWS, and I am running that script inside that server, and this script will take care of the k3d installation, and it's done. k3d is now successfully installed on my machine. and you can run the command k3d minus minus help. Then you can see what are the different options available within k3d, and my intention is I want to create a k3d cluster inside this machine. So the command is k3d cluster create. K3d cluster create, this one single command will create a local k3s cluster inside your machine, right, using Docker containers. And you already know, in order to create a Kubernetes cluster, you need a whole bunch of machines, right? I mean, that's what I have already told you. You really need a lot of machine to run Kubernetes properly. You need a number of machine where you want to run different management components of Kubernetes, and then you need a number of machine where you want to run different containers that your company manages. So at least there should be 6 machines to run different applications. And a proper Kubernetes cluster generally consists of a number of machines. But in our case right now, what I did in my case, this is an AWS machine I am using, and instead of an AWS machine, it could be your MacBook, or it could be a Windows PC that you are using. It doesn't really matter. The only requirement is that Docker should be installed, k3d should be installed, and then kubectl should be installed as well. And if you have these 3 software installed in your machine, then you can actually create a Kubernetes cluster. And this Kubernetes cluster, whatever I am going to create, we will not be using machines to run different Kubernetes component. Instead, we would be using Docker containers, and that is why you install Docker, right? So Kubernetes want some server to be there, and there should be some control plane component of Kubernetes, and there should be some worker component of Kubernetes. And a k3d makes things pretty straightforward. It would be using a number of Docker containers, and different software that Kubernetes need to run, they will run inside these containers. So literally you will get a Kubernetes cluster at the end, and you don't really care whether this cluster components are running inside a container or inside a real machine. That is not important. What you got at the end is a Kubernetes cluster, and now you can start deploying your applications as containers inside this local cluster. So the advantages of k3d is that it can run, it is a very lightweight, and this is not really the actual Kubernetes cluster that k3d uses. K3d uses K3s, which is actually a lightweight version of Kubernetes, and it is not an official Kubernetes release. K3s is a software managed by Ranger, that is a different company, and who took the Kubernetes code and removed all those unnecessary components and all those components that you might not use, and they removed most of the complexities of Kubernetes and put that inside a small 50 MB lightweight binary. And that binary consists of all the Kubernetes components, the API server, scheduler, and whatever components that you really need. So what you have just created is not a Kubernetes cluster, it is called a K3s cluster, which is a lightweight version of Kubernetes. But actually in most of the cases this is good enough, right? K3s works in most of your use cases. It supports deployment, it supports services, it supports different methodologies for setting up ingress, secret management, config maps. Most of the resources that you create in Kubernetes cluster, you can create them here. And yes, it is missing some feature, but most probably those features are not something that you use on a day-to-day basis. So on a laptop environment or on local environment, you get a Kubernetes cluster with most of the benefits that you really need, and maybe some features may be missing, but most of the features that you normally use are still there. So this is the idea. So I'm going to create this cluster inside my laptop or whichever machine you have k3d installed. So go ahead and run the command. The command is k3d cluster create, and this command will create a local. Okay, let me relog in. I got disconnected. I got disconnected from the AWS machine where I have been working, and just reconnecting, and I'm going to execute the command k3d cluster create. This single command you just run, and that's it. And that's it. Seems like it is trying to download some Docker images, and it is trying to create some Docker containers. It is creating some K3s containers. K3s is not actual Kubernetes. I already told you it is a lightweight Kubernetes which contain only the most important components of Kubernetes that you might use, and it is currently a Docker image, and looks like the k3d command I executed is downloading that Docker image and creating some container, and these containers that are going to get created are actually the going to act as the container host in my Kubernetes cluster, right? You got the point. So a Kubernetes cluster need worker nodes and control plane, and yes, K3s cluster also need that, and in our case it is there, but they are not real machine, they are Docker containers, and that is why we install Docker in the first place. All right, so and yeah, you don't care whether in the underneath whether it is Docker or real machines, it's not important. At the end, what you have got is a Kubernetes cluster, and you can work on that Kubernetes cluster using your kubectl command. Kubectl config get context is the command you can see to check the cluster, the name of the context. This is the context Kubernetes cluster that you are currently working on, and you can run the command kubectl get nodes, and you can see there's a node running on. It's a single node cluster that we have created, but you have the flexibility to create multiple node if you need. We will try that a little bit later, and right now, it is a single node cluster that is running, and I am able to run the kubectl command successfully, and I can run the command kubectl get ports. I can see all the ports. Right now there are no ports running inside the cluster, that's why it's empty, but if I want, yes, I can create them. So, and if I have a pod manifest, let me create some symbol pod inside this cluster. What I will do is I'll just go ahead and get pod YAML file from the internet, from the Kubernetes website. I'm going to copy a sample pod.yaml file, and then I'm going to, this is an nginx pod, I'm going to create this nginx pod inside the K3s cluster. So over here I'm going to create a file called nginx underscore pod.yaml, and I just pasted the content over here, and I'm going to execute the command kubectl apply -f, then the YAML file, and you can see the pod got created. Seems like the pod got created. You can run the command kubectl get pods, and you can see the pod being created inside your local cluster. And remember, this local cluster is running in your laptop. So basically, without any external help, without using any cloud provider, you got a cluster up and running inside your laptop, and you can do most of the things that you do in Kubernetes cluster in here. So now your nginx pod is running. So now it's time you can run some applications like Quite frontend, Quite backend, Quite backend 2, or WordPress, MySQL, whatever application that you want to try. You can start running those applications inside a K3d cluster, and it has lots of benefits, right?